Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt behind? Not because others were louder or smarter, but because they moved with a kind of quiet certainty, like they already saw the next 3 moves while you were still catching up. It's not just intelligence, it's clarity. And in a world full of noise, most people are starved for it. We chase speed. We chase hacks. But we rarely stop to ask, what if the edge we're looking for isn't in doing more, but in seeing more? Not in rushing forward, but in knowing when to move, how to wait, and what to ignore. Long before productivity books and leadership podcasts, there was Musashi. Not just a swordsman, but a man who turned observation into instinct and strategy into second nature. He didn't just survive battles, he dissolved chaos with calm. He didn't outfight everyone, he outthought them. But here's the quiet truth: you don't need to carry a sword to think like one. His discipline, his detachment, his way of seeing, it's all available to us. And in today's world, those who think like warriors don't just win battles. They move through life with a peace no one can disturb. So stay with me. Let's step into his mind, slowly, deliberately, and see what the modern world forgot, but the Stoics always knew. Rule 1. Think ahead like a warrior. Have you ever felt like life outpaced you, like something was unfolding around you faster than your ability to respond? Maybe it was a conversation that turned sharply, a sudden decision you weren't prepared for, or a subtle betrayal that you only recognized after the dust had settled. You replay the moment in your head, thinking, I should have seen it coming. That regret isn't weakness. It's the quiet realization that most people don't suffer from bad luck. They suffer from poor foresight. Musashi never suffered that way. Long before he became a legend with a blade, he was already dangerous, because he knew the secret most people ignore: the battle is won before it begins. For Musashi, thinking wasn't just preparation, it was the weapon. He understood what the Stoics had long written: the man who is prepared has his battle half won. And Musashi prepared not through fear, but through clarity. He didn't wait for problems to arrive. He anticipated them. He didn't guess. He studied. He trained his perception like most train their strength. He once wrote, "To win any battle, you must fight as if already dead." This wasn't some cryptic code of honor. It was a Stoic truth dressed in the armor of the East. To think like that is to live without fear of the outcome, because you've already played it out in your mind. You've seen all the ways things could go wrong, and instead of running, you faced them before they became real. That's the mindset of a warrior. That's what Musashi mastered, and what Stoicism teaches in quieter language. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. The Stoics didn't just hope for peace, they prepared for disruption, not to live in fear of it, but to walk through it unshaken. There's a story passed down about one of Musashi's duels. He showed up late, on purpose. His opponent, already rattled, had been pacing in the sun for hours, growing angry, losing patience, drenched in sweat. By the time Musashi arrived, the fight was already decided. The sword hadn't left its sheath, but one man had already lost his calm. Musashi wasn't playing games. He was applying pressure without ever touching steel. That's not luck. That's strategy. And that's exactly the kind of presence modern life demands from us. Not the noise, not the rush, but deliberate control of time, energy, and reaction. Now, think about how most people live today, how they approach arguments, work meetings, tough conversations. They react. They rush in without preparation. They don't study the dynamics, don't sense the undercurrents. They're so eager to speak that they forget to listen, so eager to win that they forget to wait. And so they walk blindly into situations that were entirely predictable, if only they had stopped to read the field first. The Stoic doesn't live that way, nor did Musashi. Both understood that true strength isn't about control over others. It's about anticipation, about knowing that when something disturbs your peace, the real damage happens not in the event itself, but in your unprepared mind. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And your estimate comes from the quality of your thinking. A modern example: imagine you're leading a team, a deadline's looming, tension is high. Most people focus on the task, but the warrior sees beyond that. He studies each teammate's mood, knows which one is likely to crack under pressure, which conversation needs to happen before the problem explodes. He's not just working, he's watching. He's not reacting, he's positioning. That's the quiet discipline that gives someone an edge in any arena: business, love, conflict, or creation. But don't mistake this for overthinking. Strategic thinking isn't paralysis, it's presence. It's the discipline of staying ahead without rushing. It's knowing that when something goes wrong, you've already walked that path in your mind. You've rehearsed the worst. And because of that, you meet it with calm, not panic. Confidence, not noise. So what does this look like for you? It starts small. Before your next decision, pause. Ask yourself not just what could go right, but what could fall apart. Not from paranoia, but from precision. How would a warrior prepare for this? What are the 3 most likely ways this could go wrong, and what would I do in each case? Write it down, speak it out loud, and when the moment arrives, you won't flinch. Not because you're fearless, but because you're ready. This is the right way, not just to fight, but to live. To step forward, not with arrogance, but with awareness. Musashi didn't win because he had something others lacked. He won because he refused to ignore the battle happening before the real one. And that's what separates the Stoic mind from the average one. It doesn't just react to life, it studies it. It prepares for it. It walks into the storm like someone who's been there before. Let that be your first shift. Stop asking how to win in the moment. Start asking how to win before the moment. Your mind is your blade. Sharpen it in silence, train it with thought, and move like someone who's already seen the path beneath their feet. Because once you start thinking this way, you'll realize seeing clearly isn't a gift. It's a discipline, and the more you practice it, the more you begin to notice not just what's coming, but what's already right in front of you, hidden in plain sight. Rule 2. See what others overlook. Have you ever had a conversation where the words seemed fine, but something in you whispered, something's off? You couldn't explain it. The tone, the timing, the way they smiled, it all looked right, but deep down, it didn't feel right. And only later did you realize you missed a signal. Not because it wasn't there, but because you weren't really watching. You were seeing, but not observing. And that's the difference between those who float through life and the ones who quietly command it. Musashi knew this. He didn't just study his opponents. He studied the room, the air, the rhythm of footsteps, the angle of shoulders, the twitch of fingers before a strike. He watched in stillness, long before he ever moved. That's what gave him the edge, not just skill, but sight. And not sight as in vision, but sight as in perception. The kind that Stoicism reveres, the kind Epictetus referred to when he said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But Musashi listened with more than his ears. He listened with his whole being. Observation in his hands became a weapon sharper than any blade, and what's remarkable is that he used it not only in battle, but in daily life, in the quiet moments, in human encounters that most people brush off as mundane. While others hurried through experience, Musashi collected patterns. He paid attention not just to what people did, but how they did it, what they avoided, where they hesitated, and that, right there, is where the true battlefield begins, not in the confrontation, but in the unseen. There's a story about a duel Musashi once had with a man known for his brute strength and lightning-fast strikes. As they faced off, Musashi didn't rush. He simply stared, long, silent, unmoving. The crowd grew restless. His opponent grew tense. And in that stretched silence, Musashi noticed something. His opponent shifted his weight ever so slightly to his right before raising his weapon. That was it. One tell, one moment of imbalance. And with that knowledge, Musashi ended the fight in a single movement. Not because he was faster, but because he had watched longer. Now ask yourself, how many moments in your own life have passed by unnoticed, simply because you weren't fully there? At work, in your relationships, even with your own thoughts. How often are you really paying attention? Most people live in a constant blur of reaction. They miss the raised eyebrow that signals discomfort, the half-second pause before someone answers, the sigh at the end of a sentence. These aren't just noise. They're data. They're the emotional fingerprints of real communication. And the warrior, he gathers them, not to manipulate, but to understand. The Stoics taught us that perception is the first tool of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. It is the truth I seek, and the truth never harmed anyone. But to seek truth, you must see it. And to see it, you must slow down." Observation begins not with your eyes, but with your restraint, with your refusal to assume, with your decision to stay present just a little longer than everyone else. Imagine walking into a negotiation, not to sell or persuade, but to watch. You notice the shift in posture when a certain topic comes up, the glance exchanged between two people before they answer, the slight tension in a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. These are not coincidences, they are maps. And when you learn to read them, you navigate life with a clarity that feels almost unfair to those still stumbling in the dark. Or imagine something closer to home, a family dinner. Someone says, "I'm fine." Most take it at face value, but you notice they haven't touched their food. Their shoulders are tight. Their tone is 2 degrees too flat. You don't confront, you just note. And maybe later in private you ask the right question, and that person, surprised by your intuition, opens up. That's observation in action. Not flashy, not loud, but deeply human, deeply right. Training this skill doesn't require special tools. It requires intention. In your next meeting, don't just hear what's being said. Listen for what's not. Watch how people shift, nod, hesitate. In conversation, match words to body language. In moments of silence, listen for the mood of the room. And in yourself, track how often your mind tries to rush ahead, to respond, to defend, to interrupt. The more you observe, the less you react. And the less you react, the more you understand. Musashi's power didn't come from prediction, it came from presence. He wasn't clairvoyant, he was attentive. And in today's world, flooded with distraction, true attention is a rare and dangerous thing. Because when you observe closely, you stop being fooled by appearances. You stop making decisions based on assumptions. You start seeing people as they are, not as they pretend to be. And that is the beginning of wisdom. So if strategy gave you the map, observation gives you the compass. One tells you where to go, the other tells you where you actually are. You need both, because knowing the path is useless if you're blind to the terrain beneath your feet. This is the path of the Stoic swordsman, not just to strike with precision, but to see with wisdom. And when you truly begin to see, you'll notice something unexpected. Not every storm comes from outside. Some of the fiercest battles begin within, and they wear the face of your own emotions. Rule 3. Feel less, choose more. Have you ever looked back on a decision and thought, if only I'd paused? That one angry reply you wish you hadn't sent, that risky leap made in excitement that ended in regret. Or maybe it was fear, whispering worst-case scenarios until you froze and missed an opportunity. We all carry these moments, not because we didn't know what to do, but because we didn't know how to feel less. Musashi did. In fact, that's what made him more than a swordsman. He was a Stoic warrior in the truest sense. He didn't shut his emotions off. He simply refused to let them lead. In the heat of battle or the quiet storms of daily life, he remained centered, grounded, fully present. Because he understood something most never learn. Clarity doesn't come from being numb. It comes from not clinging to what you feel. And that kind of detachment, it's not cold, it's courageous. The Stoics spoke of this too. Seneca once wrote, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." Musashi embodied that. He saw that fear clouds foresight, that anger poisons judgment, that even joy, when unchecked, can blind us to consequence. So he trained not just his blade, but his mind. He practiced restraint not just in action, but in reaction. And because of that, he made decisions not from impulse, but from insight. There's a well-known tale, some say myth, others claim truth, of Musashi being ambushed in a narrow alley at night. A rival, hoping to catch him off guard, leapt from the shadows, sword already swinging. Musashi didn't flinch. He didn't scream. He stepped just slightly to the left, letting the blade pass through air, and in the same motion disarmed his attacker without a word. Witnesses said his face never changed. No panic, no pride, just calm presence, like his mind had already resolved the moment long before it arrived. That's not superhuman, that's practiced stillness. And it's a kind of stillness you can train. Because life may not throw swords at you, but it throws plenty of emotional ambushes. The email that feels like an attack, the silence from someone you love, the unexpected rejection, or the sudden praise that gets to your head. And if you let your emotions grab the wheel, you'll crash, even with the best intentions. But if you pause, if you breathe, if you step slightly to the side, like Musashi, you create space. And in that space, reason returns. Perspective sharpens. You begin to see that your anger isn't truth, it's noise. That your fear isn't fate, it's just fog. And that the real you, the deeper self, sits underneath it all, watching. This is the right way. Not to suppress your emotions, but to witness them without letting them rule. To see anger rise in your chest and say, "I see you, but I'll wait." To feel joy swell and say, "Let's celebrate, but stay clear." That is strength, not the kind that lifts weight, but the kind that lifts wisdom above impulse. And it doesn't happen by accident. You train for it. Like a warrior, you build that muscle slowly. You start small. When someone cuts you off in traffic, don't react. Just breathe. When the email stings, don't reply. Step outside, touch something real, come back later. When fear tells you you're not ready, thank it and move anyway. Each time you choose response over reaction, you sharpen your edge. Journaling helps too. Musashi had no digital diary, but he left behind the Book of 5 Rings, his way of reflecting, distilling lessons, making sense of chaos. You can do the same. Before a big decision, write out what you're feeling. Ask yourself, is this emotion true or just loud? Is it leading me to wisdom or dragging me to reaction? What would I choose if I were calm? You'll find that clarity often hides beneath emotion, not within it. The Stoics didn't seek to kill feeling, they sought to tame it, to turn emotion from master to messenger. And that's what Musashi did, battle after battle, not just against enemies, but against the most dangerous opponent of all, the undisciplined self. And here's the truth: detachment doesn't make you dull, it makes you deep. It doesn't kill passion, it preserves peace. In a world that profits from your outrage and impulsivity, staying calm is an act of rebellion. And staying clear, that's how you outthink, outlast, and outmaneuver. So next time chaos knocks, don't answer with noise. Step aside, breathe, wait. Let the storm pass through you, not over you. That is what Musashi did. That is what the Stoics teach. And that is what gives you the quiet advantage in a loud, reactive world. Because once you stop reacting and start choosing, you stop being predictable. And when you become unpredictable, you become powerful. But even with clarity and observation, there's still one force that quietly limits us: our attachment to how things should be. The real shift begins when we stop gripping old patterns and start moving with reality itself. If this resonates, drop a quiet clarity in the comments. And if you're walking this path with us, consider subscribing. There's more to uncover. Rule 4. Adapt or be outpaced. Have you ever clung so tightly to a plan because it was what you prepared, because it should have worked, that when it fell apart, you fell with it? We've all been there. We build our strategies, rehearse our steps, and lock our minds around one version of success. But life doesn't honor our outlines. It shifts, it swerves, it tests our grip on certainty. And in those moments, the most dangerous thing you can do is insist that the old plan must still work. Musashi never made that mistake. As a Stoic swordsman, he understood that strength without flexibility is fragility in disguise. He didn't hold on to a method just because it had worked before. He knew that yesterday's solution could be tomorrow's trap. That's why he trained not just to perfect techniques, but to abandon them if the moment demanded it. He didn't aim to be consistent, he aimed to be effective. And that meant staying loose in the mind, even when the body was tense. Seneca once wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." Musashi chose to be led, not by luck, but by the situation itself. He let the moment guide his form. He adjusted. He responded. He reinvented himself mid-battle. That mental agility made him unpredictable and nearly impossible to defeat. There's a legend that during one of his duels, Musashi realized within seconds that his opponent had studied his previous fights. The man mirrored his opening stance, anticipating his signature moves. Most warriors would have pushed through, trusting in repetition, but Musashi paused. In that still second, he dropped his guard intentionally and took a completely different approach. It was chaotic, improvised, unfamiliar even to him, but that chaos broke the rhythm. The opponent hesitated just enough, and that hesitation ended the fight. He won not because he had a better plan. He won because he let go of the old one. Now ask yourself, how many times have you stayed in a strategy too long? How many conversations have turned cold because you wouldn't change your tone? How many projects stalled because you refused to pivot? How many relationships suffered because you were more committed to being right than being adaptive? Mental rigidity is comforting. It makes us feel secure, anchored, in control. But in truth, it's a false anchor. When the tide changes, it doesn't hold you steady, it pulls you under. The Stoics taught us that the only thing we truly control is our mind, but a rigid mind is a prison. A flexible one is power. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." But here's the deeper layer. The rock doesn't fight the water. It lets it pass. It bends through stillness. It persists not by resisting change, but by accepting it. Flexibility is not weakness. It's wisdom. The wisdom to ask, what matters more, this method or the outcome? The courage to shift when needed, not out of panic, but out of clarity. I remember a friend who built a startup from scratch. He poured everything into a product he believed in. It was beautiful, smart, well-designed. But users didn't connect with it. Feedback poured in, suggestions, critiques. But he kept saying, they'll get it eventually. They didn't. The project failed. Not because the idea was bad, but because he wasn't willing to listen to the moment. He was stuck in version 1.0 of his vision, while the world had already moved on to version 3. Compare that to another entrepreneur I met, less polished, less confident at first, but he constantly asked, what's working now? He adjusted marketing, shifted messaging, scrapped half-finished features. His product wasn't perfect, but it evolved, and that evolution made it valuable. He didn't worship his plan. He used it as a starting point. That's the warrior's way, to use structure but never be ruled by it. This applies to everything, your career, your habits, your worldview. If you're unwilling to revise your strategies, you will slowly become irrelevant in a world that changes faster than your pride can adapt. But if you learn to bend, to adjust your sails when the wind shifts, you move forward, no matter what direction the storm blows. So how do you cultivate this? Start by noticing your own resistance. When someone offers you feedback, do you listen or do you defend? When a plan doesn't work, do you double down or pause and recalibrate? The next time you're in a difficult moment, ask, is this frustration coming from the situation or from my unwillingness to change? Practice flexibility in small things. If your morning routine gets interrupted, can you still stay grounded? If a conversation goes sideways, can you steer without force? The more you do this, the more you develop the kind of mind that doesn't break under pressure, but flows through it. Musashi didn't survive because he was clever. He thrived because he let the moment teach him. He let go of what didn't work, even if it once did. That's real discipline. That's real strength. And that's the right way, not to cling to the old, but to evolve into what the moment asks of you, to shift without losing your center, to move without losing your integrity. That's what makes you not just a thinker, but a force, because even flexibility on its own is not enough. Movement without direction is still distraction, and in a world built to fracture your attention, the real advantage belongs to the one who can remain still without losing clarity. Rule 5. Sharpen focus. Rule your mind. When was the last time you truly focused, fully, deeply, without checking your phone, without drifting off into a dozen tabs, without that internal itch to do something else? In today's world, distraction isn't a glitch. It's the environment. You sit down to think, and the world pulls at your mind like waves on a tethered boat. And the question is no longer whether you're smart or skilled. It's whether you can hold your attention long enough to use what you already know. Musashi could. That was his secret edge, not just the sharpness of his blade, but the stillness of his mind. He didn't just train his body, he trained his ability to stay, to remain unmoved by noise, unshaken by chaos. Whether in the clamor of battle or the quiet repetition of practice, he stayed present, locked in, focused. And that discipline, the ability to control attention, made him more dangerous than strength ever could. The Stoics knew this as well. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Musashi lived by that truth. He understood that mental discipline wasn't just helpful, it was essential. Because without it, even the best strategy, even the sharpest insight, fades into distraction, and a distracted warrior is already defeated. There's a story passed down from Musashi's life. Before his first major duel, he disappeared for days, not to train physically, but to isolate. He removed himself from noise, from people, from anything that could fracture his attention. When he returned, those close to him said he was quieter, slower in speech, but sharper in presence. As if his mind had become a blade of its own, silent but precise. That kind of discipline isn't glamorous. It doesn't look impressive from the outside. It's built in small, silent acts, choosing to sit with a task when your mind wants to flee. Saying no to the endless scroll. Closing the door. Turning off the noise, not once, but again and again, until your focus stops being something you chase and becomes something you command. Let's be honest, most people don't lack ideas. They lack focus. They don't finish books not because they aren't smart, but because they check their phone after page 3. They don't fail at goals because they're weak, but because they scatter their attention across too many things. In a world designed to divide your mind, the ability to focus on one thing is a superpower. Musashi understood this centuries ago. He knew that true mastery wasn't about doing more, it was about doing less, better, deeply, repeatedly. He'd spend hours practicing a single motion. Not because he needed more reps, but because he needed more refinement. He was sculpting his mind through repetition, not rushing, not chasing novelty, but anchoring into presence. Think of how that applies to your own life. Imagine setting a 45-minute timer and focusing on one task completely. No tabs, no multitasking, just you and the thing that matters. For most people, it sounds impossible, but that's exactly why it works. Because discipline, like muscle, grows where resistance is highest. The more you practice, the more you begin to notice. The noise outside you gets quieter, and the voice inside gets clearer. Here's a practice worth trying. Each day, pick one task, something that matters, something that moves your life, your work, your soul. Block off time, turn off everything else, and give it your full, undivided attention, even if it's just 30 minutes, even if it's messy, even if your mind rebels, stay with it. That act alone, choosing presence over impulse, is the discipline that separates drift from direction. This isn't just about productivity, it's about identity, because the way you train your attention shapes the way you experience reality. If your mind is always divided, your life will feel scattered. If your attention is fractured, your sense of purpose will be too. But if you learn to gather your focus, to bring your full self to what matters, you'll begin to feel something rare, wholeness, not perfection, but alignment. And in that state, you don't just think better, you live better. You stop reacting to every ping and pull. You stop chasing. You begin to move with calm, with clarity, with quiet force. That's what Musashi embodied, not just a master of tactics, but a master of attention. A warrior who didn't let the world dictate his mind, but chose instead to rule over it. And this is the right way. Not the easy way, not the fast way, but the true way, the way of the focused, the present, the disciplined. Because when your mind is steady, your path becomes clear. And even when storms hit, you don't drift, you decide. So ask yourself, what would change in your life if you could hold your focus longer than your fear, longer than your boredom, longer than your impulses? That's a question worth answering. And the answer doesn't come in words, it comes in practice, in silence, in the daily decision to return to what matters, again and again. Because once you train your mind to stay, truly stay, you begin to unlock a final truth. Strategy, observation, detachment, discipline, they are not separate skills. They are parts of a single system, a way of thinking, a way of being. Because in the end, these aren't just habits, they're pieces of something greater. And when brought together, they stop being techniques and start becoming the way you are. Rule 6. Win by thinking as one. Have you ever met someone who seemed calm under pressure, sharp without showing off, and always 2 steps ahead, yet you couldn't quite explain how they do it? They don't speak more than others. They don't flaunt their intelligence. But their presence carries weight. Their decisions cut through noise, and when things fall apart, they stay intact. That's not luck. That's not genius. That's training. Silent, consistent, integrated. Musashi didn't master just one skill. He wasn't just strategic or just observant or just disciplined. He wove these threads into something whole. That's what made him a warrior others couldn't predict. He saw before he moved. He planned without attachment. He stayed focused while chaos begged for his attention. Every decision he made passed through this internal filter, not to react, but to respond with precision. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And Musashi didn't argue. He practiced daily, relentlessly, until thinking clearly under pressure wasn't a choice, it was his nature. That's the heart of this philosophy. It's not about doing more, it's about becoming more aligned. Less noise, more signal. Think of it like this. Strategy gives you direction. Observation gives you insight. Detachment gives you clarity. And discipline gives you follow-through. Remove one, and the structure collapses. But when they work together, something changes. Not just in your outcomes, but in your identity. You start anticipating problems instead of reacting to them. You notice what others overlook. You remain grounded when emotions rise. And you keep your attention steady while the world demands you split it. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because you've trained your mind to walk the right way. So start small. Choose one area, maybe your focus, maybe your emotional reactions, maybe the way you observe people. Work on it daily, like Musashi did with the sword. Over time, these aren't just tactics, they become who you are, because in the end, to outthink 99% of people isn't about domination, it's about refinement. You don't need to be louder, just clearer, not faster, just more aware. That's what makes a Stoic swordsman, quiet, present, precise. And in a world of noise, that is a power few will ever understand until they feel it. If this spoke to something in you, stay with us as we keep training the mind the right way. Subscribe if you're walking this path too, and drop a quiet clarity in the comments. The journey is just beginning, and the next insight might be the one that shifts everything.